Well, welcome everybody to another episode of the Art Business Podcast. My guest today is Sotheby's Institute of Art MA Art Business alumna. I'm David Bellingham, the program director of that program, and Anastasia was studying with us 2018 to 19. And she is now, having done quite a lot of things since and before then, indeed, she's now Associate Director at Pelham Communications in London. And I quote her, "I bring structure to creative lives," unquote. So Anastasia, you're very welcome.
Thank you so much, David, for having me. I'm a listener of the podcast, and it's thrilling to be here as your guest.
Well, that's good. That's good. Well, anyway, it's great to have you here on this very hot London afternoon. I hope that this weather keeps up over the bank holiday
We need
weekend.
this.
Are you doing anything in particular, or are you still working?
I am. Will potentially be working over the weekend with Venice Biennale of Architecture kicking
Oh,
off
yes.
next week. We
Mm.
are there because we are working with the Uzbekistan pavilion, which promises to be a wonder. But that means I'll have to work over the weekend potentially.
Well, it's kind of shame, but it's nice work if you can get it.
It's nice work. And it's also about the sun. The pavilion is very much centered on the sun. So
Sounds brilliant.
there's
Yeah,
some light shining over me over the next week or so.
it sounds fantastic. We did, and you reminded me that the year that you studied with us, we always go to the Venice Biennale with our art business students, but we've reverted to only going every other year for the art Biennale, although we cheat, as I said, and we take one group in November and one in June so that each cohort goes. But we did experiment in your year with going to architecture, and we were saying that it was actually very enjoyable.
It was a delightful experience. It was my first Venice Biennale ever. I haven't been to Venice during the Biennale before. And I loved the experience, every moment of it. I went the next year by myself with my mom to the art one. And while it was obviously very different, and I appreciated the beauty and the intensity of it, it was very overwhelming. But that was also the one that kind of predicted the unraveling of events going forward, because it was the May You Live in the Interesting Times Biennale. And we know what happened next. It was COVID and whatnot.
I've still got the tote bag with "May You Live in Interesting Times." I love it. It's my favorite
I
because
have a catalog. I didn't splurge for the bag. I thought, no, I've got too many bags.
I think I had
Maybe
the
I should
swatch.
have.
I had the swatch watch as well. I said, do you remember? I like the colors.
Right, right. Yes,
Yeah.
that was
Whereas
interesting.
last year's title was a bit weird with "Stranieri ovunque," like foreigners everywhere. They translated it into English, which was deliberately ambiguous, obviously.
Of course. And I think that was the common joke of the first preview days. Everybody was kissing each other on those narrow Venice streets saying, oh, again, foreigners everywhere.
It's great. And of course, it's something that Venetian people say for good reasons because they've been thrown out of
Absolutely.
their own city, well, anyway, we won't go into that. But it was a great title in the end. And did you, the Biennale we went, it got us into the global south. I thought it was a wonderful inspiration.
Absolutely. And I was in Venice last year as well. Last year, we worked with the Saudi National Pavilion at the Biennale.
Mm.
So I think of all the ones that I've visited so far, and I'm obviously looking forward to the upcoming one. Last year was my yet favorite, only because I got to actually work at the Biennale, not be a student, not be a visitor, not be a researcher, but be behind the scenes. And I love being behind the scenes. I love being at the wheels of it all. I love kind of turning, making the machinery going. This gives it a certain type of elan, in a way, to me.
I'm jealous. It must be very exciting. Anyway, let's start at the beginning. So Pelham Communications for listeners, we'll obviously you can explain exactly what that is, but maybe I could start by asking, how did your journey into the world of branding and communications begin?
It's a story that's now more than 20 years old. I started working in the early 2000s as journalist and as advertorial copywriter on the then very trendy radio station in Russia that was called Radio Maximum. I don't think it operates still, but maybe it does. That's for me part of my past already. And I worked in the morning show, and at some point it got shut down. I decided to leave the radio station. I tried to do some radio gigs at other stations, didn't really work out. So I went to work with a friend of mine in a little branding agency that was owned and launched by the husband of then marketing director of Kenzo Parfum. They were both French. She spent most of her time in Paris. He spent most of his time in Moscow. And at some point, because of this family connection, we were supervising a very big event, the relaunch of the Kenzo flower perfume, which was then one of the value drivers for the company. They've relaunched it in Moscow during the film festival, Moscow Film Festival, on the Red Square. They've created 4 huge poppy fields, installations of artificial poppies throughout the Red Square, with sound, with music in the evening. It was magical. It was an artistic intervention of their creative director, Patrick Urcade. And I just fell in love with it. I thought, oh my God, this is the life. I want to do more of this, be in the beauty industry, be in events, be in communication. And I just started building my very early career through that ladder. And then I very quickly went to work in-house. I've launched MAC Cosmetics with Estée Lauder in Russia, spent 3 years there, grew the brand presence in the media landscape quite well. It then got me an invitation to join Dior Perfumes and Cosmetics, also in Russia, thanks to the results that they've seen me make for MAC, and thanks to French, which I then spoke much better than English. Now it's the exact opposite, I'm afraid. And then I spent 3 years in Dior, and it ended on the same spot at the Red Square with Ralph Simmons's collection, the first couture collection that he did. He's shown it in Paris in 2012-ish, early 2013, and then he brought it to Moscow as a trade show. And I very vividly remember standing at the same spot that I stood some 10 years before that, all excited about the world of beauty. And there I was wearing some Lent Dior clothing and accessories and slightly drunk on champagne. But I felt I've done my time in the industry in a way. That was it. And it was time for me to move on. So I took a couple of months to figure out what I really wanted to do. And then my Dior president, who had by then left the company, moved to Unilever Russia, which is a huge FMCG, consumer goods conglomerate. He called me and said, how would you like to join me in Unilever? I know it's not luxury. I know it's not exactly what you love, but maybe you'll do it. And I thought with him, I would go anywhere. And I joined him, and I took care of all the consumer brands of the Unilever portfolio for 4 years. And then, cut, and I'm in London. But I feel like there is more to tell about how this change came to be.
Yeah, so so far you've spoken about being in the in the cosmetics industry, but you've also given us some clues about your emotions, your love of public spaces, Red Square. I remember myself when I went to Moscow. It's really amazing. And what I was going to ask you is the poppies. Could you say a little bit more about those? Because I immediately thought we had a moment a few years ago in London when I can't remember the name of the artist, apologies, but there were all these ceramic poppies that were placed around the moat of the Tower of London, and they were obviously the poppy in the UK and Canada,
Yes.
which is where, the idea was invented. I think is it refers to the dead in World War One when the red poppies famously came up at the end of the battle in the summer fields, and they were
Yes.
seen as a poetic metaphor for the souls of the poor young, mainly young dead soldiers. So what were they? Were they made of ceramics, or what was their significance
No,
in the UK?
basically the poppy stems from the concept of flower by Kenzo. That's the
Ah,
name of the perfume.
right.
So flower by Kenzo was at some point conceived as an idea of a non-existing perfume because poppies don't smell. They have no scent. But they are so gorgeous and glorious and captivating, and they have this um, um, image of diffusing a slightly narcotic aroma in different cultures, which is not there technically. Yes, opium poppies do give narcotic seed, but when the flower is on the stem, it has no smell. So Kenzo team and their perfumers, I don't remember who was the nose behind this very juice, but they thought, what if we create an imaginary perfume of a poppy? So they've created Flower by Kenzo, and the bottle had an artificial poppy inside of it. Each bottle had a poppy. And the perfume smelled of very kind of bittersweet, musky something, a very captivating scent. And it was one of their key sales drivers. At some point, as all products do, it started to slightly decline. That's why they wanted to rejuvenate it, relaunch it, highlight it in some way, with Russia being one of the main consumers of perfumes and most importantly, heavy, musky, kind of slightly Eastern Arab veering perfumes. Because, for instance, in Japan, they have a totally different olfactory profile. They tend to veer towards fresher, lighter scents. That's why, taking the inspiration from the poppy in the concept, Patrick Courcade said, why don't we plant artificial poppies on the red square? Color, again, the poppy in the bottle was always red. And those poppies were made of paper. It was a metal kind of rod, very thin one, covered in papier-mâché, the green for the stem, red for the actual flower. And they were manually planted, and they were moving and shaking, and there was music, and at night there was light. So all the reference was just around the charm of a flower that doesn't smell, but we think it does.
Excellent. It's incredible. What a great description. And of course, presumably it smelt nothing like that other perfume called opium.
No, absolutely. Very different. Very different. And obviously all those poppies, because they were paper, we used to spray them with the actual juice every
Yeah.
morning and every night we're spraying. So these fields would also
Ooh.
project the waft of this smell, of this aroma. It was a very, very beautiful activation. And then when the time was done, it was maybe on about a week or so, we were distributing them to everyone who was around. We were giving poppies away.
Good. So therefore, was there a moment when you realized you wanted to work in the cultural or art space specifically as opposed to cosmetics? Maybe you could even start by, can you remember when you first realized there was this thing called art, maybe as a child, or was it later in life?
I am lucky in that regard because my family was very artistic. Nobody in the family is an artist, but everyone's very musical. And everyone appreciates art and humanities and this kind of education and formation of a person. So I've always been exposed to opera, which if you follow my Instagram, you know that I'm a very frequent goer to. I go 4 times a month at least.
Mm.
So opera, classical music. I used to do piano. I used to sing from a very early age. Everyone in the family is a great singer, and we sing together folk songs, romances. It's a thing in my family. And art as well. From a very young age, I used to go to museums, be it with my grandma or with my mom or with my dad. And it was a very generous education in that regard. I also remember when I was a child, I was sickly, as many young kids are when our immunity is still building. But I used to just spend my sickness days laying in bed, reading books, but also shuffling through postcards, the sets of postcards from various museums of the world. It was still USSR back then. We couldn't travel internationally, but somehow we could purchase these sets of postcards with the main overs of the Prado, the Louvre, whatever museum you can imagine, in a newspaper shop. And I used to just shuffle through them and look at those magnificent artworks. And then when I found myself later in life in the Louvre, in Prado, in London, at Sotheby's and Christie's previews, I recognized many of the artworks that I used to know when I was just a child. And again, it was very emotional for me. So that started from a very young age.
Amazing. And do you go to I think the Colosseum in London, they used to have two opera houses, really. I think doesn't really have much opera now. So presumably you're speaking mainly of the Royal Opera.
Yes, I mainly go to Covent Garden, and
Mm.
then I also go to a lot of concerts. I am a friend of Barbican, of South Bank, Royal Philharmonic. I am slightly manic. People laugh at me at work, but I
Well,
mean,
yeah.
this is why I moved to London. You have such a scene here. I should say
Mm.
we have such a scene here because now I am also a British citizen from quite recently. So we have such a scene here. It's a shame for me, being passionate about it, not to use it and not to be part of it to the full extent that I would want to.
Absolutely. Yeah, we were at the ballet the other night actually, and then so I tend to go to opera with my son, and I go to ballet with my wife. And
Yeah, there's
so my
always
son,
this, there's always the divide in the family. I go
exactly.
alone. I go alone.
Really, that's
Yeah.
interesting because I go to football on my own.
I go to opera alone always. My daughter is a bit young to sustain a whole big
Yeah,
production.
yeah.
She loves ballet but gets tired easily. My husband doesn't like classical music. He loves academic music, new
Mm.
classical music,
Oh,
so Steve
interesting.
Reich and going forward.
Yeah.
We sometimes go to Sadler's Wells with him. So contemporary
Mm.
dance can still be a thing for him. But I mainly go alone.
Mm. I think when I was your age, when you were saying that you go 4 times a month, there was a stage when I was going almost every night. If it was very singer orientated when I was your age. So there were the three tenors around still, Domingo and Carreras. I know that they're still alive, those two. But it was tremendous, and I used to get a ticket for nothing up in the upper slips. It was uncomfortable, but I just wanted to hear these
Exactly.
singers.
I
So
go
I
to
was
the upper
pretty manic at one
slips.
stage. Yeah.
As much as I would want to go in the stalls, it's still a limited budget.
Of
So I
course.
go up, I sometimes stand,
Yeah,
but I hear the music.
absolutely. It doesn't matter, does it? So,
No, it does
so
not.
good, good, good. So, we'll come back to, so we talked about sort of your original experiences in with art. What a wonderful story. And I remember that it's hard to say to today's students that you can find an image anywhere now just by the click of a button, whereas when we were younger and you in the USSR, it was much harder to find books or, and so I empathize with that. We might come back at some point after the next question obviously we will come back to the art world. But so thinking about your studies on the Masters in Art Business at Sotheby's Institute of Art, may I ask what drew you to the program and maybe how it then shaped your approach to the art world and its markets?
Of course. And it's very personal. As I said, I worked in Unilever for 4 years. My daughter was born. I took maternity leave. I was semi-conscious, as every young mother is, for the first 6-9 months. And then
And
I
father,
started,
and father.
and father,
I
and
used to have to do
father.
the nighttime.
Yes. Oh, well, my husband was working his ass off at
I
home.
was doing that as well.
I would say, Moscow with my mom. So he was in the city earning money. I was there.
Good.
And then I thought at some point, everyone says, oh, when you have a child, it just shifts your perspective. You just
Definitely.
find yourself changed. Your life starts revolving around the child. I didn't find my life revolving just around Marsha, my daughter. And I felt more or less the same. It was still me with my aspirations, with my wants, my needs, my youth, my drive, my energy. But obviously, the thought of having a child, the notion of a child just was there on the back of my mind, and it will be there until the day of I die, which obviously shifts how you look at things and how you make decisions. But I also felt my own mortality for the very first time very distinctively, which was a very new concept for me back then. I was 35 when Masha was born, and I haven't thought about being mortal before then, to be honest. And then I thought, okay, I'm 35 now. How much have I left? Have I got left for me? 40 active years if I'm very lucky, maybe even less. Let's hope for 40. So what do I want to do in these 40 years? Who do I want to be? Do I want to go back to the corporate world and do PR for Lipton tea and Dove and ice creams, which I love and use, but do I want to just do that? And then the magic word curator suddenly popped up in my head. And I thought, that's new. Wouldn't I want to be a curator, maybe? Curate shows and be in the art world and, faff around and be glamorous. And then I started researching. And I thought, well, let's just be realistic. You have a whole career already behind your belt. Why ditch it? Maybe rather veer it towards a new sector that's clearly interesting for you and has always been since you were a child. So again, cut, and I'm applying to Sotheby's Institute of Art because I thought, okay, my husband and I have always wanted to change country, go work somewhere else, move potentially. We were considering going to London. We were hopeful for a work contract transition. That didn't happen. Also, it was 2015, 2016. Politics back home started to go south, started to sour up really quickly. Long story short, we were considering a permanent move. And I thought, okay, to go to a new market, I need to understand what the market is about. And I started comparing various programs. I wanted to do an MBA, but then back then there were no MBAs in the art world. There was just one launched by the Birkbeck Institute, but it was really fresh. So I wasn't ready to invest that much, although I applied for that. I applied for the MA in Art Business at Sotheby's. And I was thinking between, should I do Sotheby's or Christie's? And the only thing that told me, no, don't do Christie's, do Sotheby's, was Sotheby's program's website, because it was very clearly outlined there that in addition to the annual curriculum, in addition to the electives that the Institute is offering, there will be a potential work placement. And I thought, this is why I'm choosing Sotheby's over Christie's, because Christie's website did not have these details. And even when I requested a pack, there was nothing about a work placement. I know that they've since shut their MA programs down. They've again become more internal focused, so they are growing professionals to keep being at Christie's. And Sotheby's Institute of Art appealed to me because of the work placement, because of the curriculum, which I thought could give me an understanding of this completely new market, completely new international scene, and give me, if I worked hard to get it and hopefully would get it, give me an actual practical experience working straight after and straight while being a student.
And talking about work placements, it may not surprise you that post-lockdown, with students, I think, and a lot of people having some issues about their self-confidence, they're communicating with people in the real world, that the work placement option, which is an elective, is really popular. It's just grown immensely in popularity. We have 100 students this year doing a work placement with, I think maybe even with Pelham. I can't
Yes,
remember.
we do have Esther with us. She
Yes,
started a few weeks ago.
yes.
Pelham always works with Sotheby's, and my previous job in London, which was the Young Masters Art Prize launched by Cynthia Corbett Gallery, it started with a work placement with with Sotheby's, and I remained with Cynthia and the team for 3 lockdown years.
Brilliant. And Anastasia, can you think of any standout moments while you're on the program, maybe involving visits or other being with other students?
I was one of the oldest, the cohort of slightly older students. Let's put it this way, in the course. I had Penny with me, the amazing lawyer who we keep a very good relationship with, Shirley, who's then gone back to Austin, Texas, where she's originally from. But we were all in this very different stage as compared to the younger students who were maybe still finding the way in the art world, and they were doing their second MA. Some lucky ones were doing a third MA, while we had careers behind our backs and we needed a shift. And first of all, having this peer support was very helpful, because we had a different profile and it was daunting. We didn't feel as young, but we also had slightly more experience. It's always a kind of, a fine line how to balance the two. We had tremendous fun doing the trips. I absolutely loved TFAF Maastricht. To this day, TFAF Maastricht remains one of my most favorite art fairs. I dream to go back at some point. I loved Venice, as you say. And then I think what was very much eye-opening for me was the different approach to learning and to studying. Between the program in 2018 and my graduation from Moscow State University in 2022, it's been 16 years. So 16 years back, my studies in Moscow were very different. We had course lectures with all the course, over 300 people, listening to a professor in linguistics or foreign literature or whatnot, giving a very thorough and detailed lecture. So everything they knew, they would deliver to us. And then the reading week was just to add a few bits and bobs on the core structure. Whilst here in the UK, it was very different. I remember you saying at some point, the reason we are giving you these very top line lectures is to feed you the keywords, the areas for research. But the bulk of your learning and the bulk of your research happens with you yourself, going to the library, be it in the Institute, be it the British Library, be it in the V&A, be it anywhere else. And you are basically in charge of what and how you learn. And that was a major shift for me. And I think it was a major shift for many of my schoolmates back then.
Yeah.
But for me, it was very beneficial.
Good, good. I mean, I still say the same thing. I still bore all my
I'm sure you
students
do.
saying, your postgraduate students, we give you the tools, we give you a lot of knowledge because this knowledge often doesn't exist because
Yes,
this current art world, that we have the commentators, we have the art journalists, but the anything academic tends to get out of date very quickly. So a lot of this is about you picking up the tools
yes,
from us and then running with it in your own art worlds. So yeah,
absolutely.
I certainly empathize with that. So, you've worked, as we've heard, you've worked with brands like Dior, MAC, and Dove. Um, what lessons from the luxury and beauty world might have transferred into your work in the art market? I mean, was it all? I always think that nothing in life is a waste when you look back. So how did you use all of that when you then went into the art world after graduation, which we'll talk about in a moment?
Um, Several aspects of that I think are important. First and foremost, while working in-house, it always were the big corporations for me. So MAC Cosmetics is Estee Lauder, which is an American corporation. Dior is LVMH, which is French. Unilever is British Dutch. So, but it's always huge businesses, huge companies, huge structures, a certain way of working. I'm not saying it's good or it's bad, but it's a certain way of working, a certain way of relationships in the team, with your line management, with your VP, with your director, with your peers overseas, because it's never a sole kind of initiative, but it's always something that's also happening in the UK, in France, in America, anyway. So having this global understanding and having this corporate structure ingrained in me, and the knowledge of how to build a strategy, how to create structure from chaos, bring it to a creative life, as you noted, that's what my Instagram says. This is something that I always been prone to, but this corporate life has just honed these skills in. And if you add to that a very specific layer that's prone to luxury and luxury beauty, which is highest importance to detail, because luxury is all about fine little details, a certain type of bow that you tie a bag of perfume with, a certain font on an invitation that you send to a journalist or to a key opinion leader, a certain shape of a chair that has to be present at the event. And yes, obviously, it's not something that if it doesn't exist, the world will stop revolving. No, it's not brain surgery. It's not conquering the space. It's not, sadly, solving the issue of hunger. As one of my financial directors used to say, in times of great stress and panic in the company, she would say, guys, we're just selling lipstick. We're just selling lipstick, yes, but we do it with gusto. So this flair of detail, plus a strong, huge foundation of structuring information and driving projects forward, even when there's uncertainty, even when plans are changing, and they will always change. This is something that I carry with me to this day. And this is what got me in Pelham at some point.
I was going to ask you, maybe you could rewind a little on that and say, when did you first become aware of Pelham Communications? Maybe what attracted to you to working for them, and then what stood out to you about what they did in the London and international art world?
So again, a mix of personal and interpersonal and global politics. At some point, after graduation, I thought about launching my own business. Honestly, didn't do my research very well. That's a mistake. I never did CASDEV, which I should have done, because there being customer development. Should have done that, didn't do it. No, my mistake. Did my work placement. Cynthia Corbett said, why don't you stay on? We are a tiny gallery. We are not for profit. We are not able to pay you huge money, but it's something. I stayed on part-time, and I've been with the gallery throughout COVID and post-COVID, and we've done several iterations of the price, which was amazing. And Cynthia is now one of my closest friends, and I've learned so much by working in a tiny gallery where everyone is doing everything. It was a very humbling experience because I came to the UK being this rather well-known person back home with a network of journalists, with a certain salary, certain kind of understanding of who I am and what I'm worth in life. This flew off me very quickly, but then I learned how to hang a show or rehang a show on my own without help. I know how to do an invoice. I know how to submit an application to an art fair. I know how to package an artwork for a client, move tables, brew some coffee, paint some plinths for a ceramic. I've done it. I can do it. It's a great experience. Nothing is ever wasted. But then at some point, it was COVID, and my husband and I got offered a strategic project, and we've never worked together before that. Me always being in-house, he was always on the agency side. He's a creative director. And we always thought, oh, the moment we start working together, our marriage is done. But it turned out that we are the best collaborators ever. So we launched Lander, a marketing communications boutique, I would say. We've done a few projects. We've started growing our client base. And just before the war started in Ukraine, we had 3 contracts in the pipeline ready to be signed, but each one of them had a connection to Russia or Ukraine. So the night where it all started, nobody was thinking about marketing communications anymore. We didn't have clients, and honestly, we couldn't think about those things because what was happening was devastating. But then at some point, I mean, we have a family to feed. We needed money. We side hustled. We tried to find projects, and then we said to ourselves, okay, we are now having to go back to the job market and try to just find jobs. Whoever is the first one to land an offer is the lucky one. And it just so happened that we both started applying here and there and everywhere. And I thought, okay, yes, I didn't really maybe want to work in an agency, but then I'm not in a position to choose. So I started applying like mad to every communication-related art world opportunity. And it was very tough. But I applied to Pelham amongst other places because I remembered that I had talked to them whilst I was writing my MA dissertation. They were one of my respondents in the research that I was conducting. And they were very nice with me. And they were advertising for a role of senior account director for one of their Middle Eastern clients. And I thought, this just might be it. And it was it. They hired me because they needed someone back then to take care of one of the core contracts that was Noor Riyadh, which is a festival of light and art in Riyadh city in Saudi Arabia. And my background of working in corporate structures and knowing how to write strategies was a perfect fit for the job, because the commissioner of Noor Riyadh and many other public art initiatives in Riyadh city is one of the royal commissions under the Ministry of Culture. And these commissions are relatively new for this young and kind of developing country. Everyone in the client teams is very clever. They've gone to the West, to the States, to the UK. They've studied, they've done their MBAs or their Art World MAs, but then they came back home to bring this knowledge and this savviness to their homeland and build something beautiful there. And they know how to work in a, I would say, westernized kind of way, but then they are bringing the best practices and adapting them to the local realities. And this is what Jasmine Pelham, who is our founder and creative director, saw in me. She saw someone who, being Russian and knowing how to adapt a global strategy to a very specific market, is still able to build a cohesive, logical, forward-looking strategy and then execute it whilst being in line with the head office.
Interesting. So I think you've probably just answered the question I was then going to ask you about the fact that you've worked with clients in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Uzbekistan, how you might tailor strategies for different cultural landscapes. Because I think on the MA Art business, we try to make our students aware that actually, if you're dealing with someone in another nation in the art world, there are overlaps of experience and behavior, but there are differences, and it's very useful to know those. But can you comment on maybe the work that you're about to do with Uzbekistan? Is that different from working with the Saudis?
Yes and no. Both being South, global South kind of, and even East countries. Both having a dense and colorful past. Both being at the crossroads of political, economical processes of their respective regions. Both having a very different hierarchy in the society, different mores to what the Western way of living looks like. And this needs to be taken into account, this needs to be respected, and this is fascinating to unpack. Because I'm Russian and because I come from the USSR, I had this exposure as a child to very different cultures. And I'm leaving colonialism aside for now. It's just lived experience that I have. I read Uzbek fairy tales and tales. I dreamt of going to Samarkand and Khiva and Bukhara and Tashkent. This was always something that's fascinated me, and I had some kind of awareness of. And this is what works in my favor now, because working with this client and the fantastic projects that Uzbekistan's Art and Culture Foundation, which is my client, Art and Culture Development Foundation, are putting forward, I have more understanding of that ancient culture that many of the Western journalists that I meet. The Central Asia is still a land of mystery to many. Whereas I, having an understanding of that and sharing the language, because so many Uzbeks still speak Russian, I can be that bridge in between.
Interesting. And oh, wow. I mean, we could carry on talking about that. I mean, we've had all these exhibitions recently, including one in Venice, actually, in the Doge's Palace, which is about Marco Polo and the Silk Route. And we've had them in London recently. So everyone's very interested in that now. So how do you view the evolving role of the media in the art world, especially like with influencers and new digital platforms becoming very dominant? I mean, obviously Pelham works at the forefront of that. Maybe you could say where that might be going next.
I mean, we all are looking at how the media landscape evolves daily. We are all aware of how digital has now, I wouldn't say it's taking over traditional print, but it very much has, in terms of the speed of delivery of the information, in terms of where we are getting our content. Definitely, we are striving to kind of to be abreast of what's happening at all times. That's why our teamwork is so crucially important, because whilst I am concentrated on slightly bigger and region-specific clients, my other colleagues are looking after different profiles, like commercial galleries and sometimes individual artists and events and cultural initiatives and art and architecture initiatives in other parts of the world. And we are constantly exchanging knowledge, best practices, context, journalists, writers, freelancers. This pool is ever growing, and we are in constant contact with each other and with those who write, because we know how journalists and freelancers appreciate a new pitch, a new idea, a new angle on something they either very well know of or have never heard of before. And that's where the excitement about great communication expertise and work in PR is stemming from, because you are able, when this first connection has been made with a journalist, you're able to craft a story together. And by this, I don't mean that I'm just sending them the press release and looking after the fact that they should copy and paste it. Never that, but rather being there to answer a question, to provide a bit more information, to give a fact, to find some figures, to find a good picture. And then the story comes out. And again, it's a teamwork. And it's beautiful and it's exciting. And the latest example of that is a big profile on Tashkent modernism that Oliver Wainwright, the Guardian's architecture critic, has published last week. It's a result of a huge work of the client, the Art and Culture Development Foundation of Uzbekistan, who've been protecting Tashkent modernism buildings for a huge amount of time and developing them and making sure this heritage doesn't dissolve. That's the work of our fantastic team, being next to Oli, talking to him, showing him angles, helping find the information he requires and his editor requires for the story that they've shaped, and then bringing a group of journalists to Tashkent and showing them around and giving them access to people, to the foundation's chairperson, Gayane Umerova, who is the powerhouse behind all this project. When then several weeks after and months after you see a piece in The Guardian, it's just pure excitement.
It's fantastic. And you might want to tell us a little bit more about the Lander, and is that in any way associated with you growing the Young Masters Art Prize? Maybe
not in any way.
It's
currently kind of frozen.
Okay.
My husband's doing other things. I cannot take care of Lander because it would be a conflict of interest.
Oh,
me being comms, and Lander also very much focused on communication and marketing strategies.
Yeah.
So we're all being fair to ourselves. And I mean, even if I wanted, I wouldn't have time for that now.
But it's great. But now you know you can do that. It's a possibility in later life, you know.
Exactly. That's why I'm saying it's something that's there. It's just, it might come back. It might come back.
So the Young Masters Art Prize interests me at the moment because I'm a judge on an idea created by another alumna, Neha Jaiswal, who's from India, and she's now in London, and she runs this thing called the Arts Family, and it's about South Asian emerging artists. And we optionally now put our MA Art Business students. I'm creating a list of interested students. We put them together to work with these emerging artists who are at similar stages of their career. So it's just an interesting thing. So maybe could you tell us a little bit about the young? The
Young Masters Art Prize is a not-for-profit initiative that was launched by Cynthia Corbett, who is the owner and founder of Cynthia Corbett Gallery.
Absolutely.
She always wanted to give opportunities to young artists, emerging artists, to present themselves to the art world. So she's launched this biannual prize based solely on donors and patrons' support. Because she doesn't have and never had a gallery space, but rather operated from art fairs and pop-up opportunities across London. That helped us, by the way, during COVID, because we didn't have to pay rent. So whenever Cynthia curates a booth or a pop-up, unless it's a solo show, she always dedicates considerable space to the Young Masters. And Young Masters is about artists who reflect upon the art of the past in their practice. And it can be treated very widely, and Cynthia treats it very widely. It can be obviously painting, photography. At some point, she's added a ceramics prize, which really drove the ceramics market here in London and internationally for the gallery as well. There's a strand that focuses on women artists within the prize. So the medium can be any, as long as there's a reference to the old masters, be it in the technique or in the subject matter or in the overall artistic interest of the talent, so to speak.
Amazing. It's really great because, as you know, I'm a classicist, so I run an elective at the moment on the market for antiquities and old masters with my colleague at the Institute, Barbara Lassett, who's an 18th century art historian. So I love the idea of anything that tunes into the old masters. I don't know what they are. The paintings on your wall intrigue me because they slightly remind me of the style of Flora Jutnovich, who is an artist who relies on the Rococo as a historical.
And she was one of the alumni of the Young Masters Art Prize. I think it was the first or second edition for Flora Jutnovich. This is a Russian artist. His name is Vitaly Prostov. He lives in St. Petersburg. And this is the artwork that I gave to my husband for one of our wedding anniversaries. Victor used to do a project with Vitaly, a digital project for the Tretiakov Gallery several years ago. It was a show dedicated to Russian folk tales, very dreamy and dark and fascinating. So to do a layer, to extend a layer of communications around the exhibition, Victor and his agency were commissioned to create Instagram filters based on the archetypes of Russian folk tales. So to create those Instagram filters, they've collaborated with a makeup artist, with a painter, who was Vitaly, with a graphic designer, with a type font designer, and with an illustrator. So there were 5 masks that you could choose. And Vitaly created the mask of the arch villain of a Russian folktale, which is Kощей Бессмертный, the immortal kind of metaphor of death incorporated. And we love Vitaly's style. So I just got this artwork for my husband as a surprise.
It's beautiful. Is that a swan I can see?
I think it's
it's just a mark. It's just a mark that looks a little bit like a swan.
Yeah, but it's a body. It's kind of, maybe it's a shoulder.
I can see the body now. Yeah, I meant in the bottom right of the left one. Yeah.
But it's abstract, and I've since acquired several more artworks from Vitaly for my mom. And they can be flowers, they can be a silhouette of a female body or a male body, but it's mainly abstraction. And I love how powerful. I don't know whether you get this, David, or not. People sometimes ask me, how do you know that art is good? And whenever I have a feeling that someone just punched me in the chest when I see an artwork, I know it's there.
Same here. Yeah. And that brings us to it's a nice metaphor, because it brings us to the quickfire round, as I sometimes call it, which is favorite artist right now. I mean, I obviously we change, our moods change, and you don't have to say Vitali. And I apologize to Vitali if you don't choose Vitali.
No, no, I think now I would still say Joana Vasconcelos. I so love her. It's just the name just
The
pops to my head, and there are
Portuguese,
so many.
Portuguese
Portuguese,
lace,
yes,
yeah,
yes,
ceramics, tiles,
yes.
wonderful.
Tiles, plastic forks, the heart made of
Yeah.
plastic forks.
Yes,
Love her.
she used to be a little bit more high profile in London when contemporary art was really on the move in the first
Yeah.
decade of the new millennium. And I remember going to Venice, and she had that boat that she put um, Portuguese tiles all the way around the hull of a boat,
Yes, that was a
and
beautiful one.
you could go out on the boat for an hour around the lagoon.
Yeah, yeah.
And what
Oh,
about
and also I
go
can't not
on,
mention him, Ilya Kabakov.
Ilya Kabakov? Good. We should put these
I have a
names.
friend. I have
How
a
do
friend.
you? Oh, wow, here we go. I like this. This is what we used to do in lockdown with our students.
Yes, that's
That's
just
lovely.
that's a sheet of a set of 12.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's rather expensive to acquire 12, so I think it was slightly post lockdown. We just we had a gang of people who wanted to buy a print by Ilya. This set was an auction, so there were 12 people. We chipped in, we bought the whole set, and then we divided between each other.
It's fantastic. What about a city? Do you have a city that, if you had to choose one city in the world, what
London.
might you live?
It's
Oh,
London.
London.
It's
Interesting.
London. When I was young, and I dedicated 15 years of my life to studying French language and French literature, because it was 10 years of school and then 5 years of university. And I'm a teacher of French and French literature by first education, my first MA, but I've never taught in my life. But I was absolutely infatuated with Paris. I thought it's the bee's knees. I just want to be there, and it just suits me so well. But then, and I used to go rather often, but then I went to London for the first time in early 2000s, and I thought, oh my God, what is this city? What is this brimming creative energy around? I vividly remember that feeling. I was crossing the Waterloo Bridge and thinking, I've never experienced anything like this. So there was,
I think you spoke earlier about how you came to London with your husband, and that you were a big fish in Moscow, and suddenly I hear that so much. It's quite a sad thing to hear from you know, I'm sometimes even in a Uber, and the cab driver says, "Oh, my family back home, we were really art collectors, and now you kind of have to readjust." And I'm sure that would happen to me if I went to live in somewhere else. It would happen. It's interesting. So obviously you see London in a way that I don't, because I brought up with it, but I do.
absolutely.
I Having said that, it is definitely, a buzz began to come into London, which was very different in the new millennium with the opening of Tate Modern. It was a very
Yes.
different buzz to what it was before. It's always been very vibrant and lively, but in very different ways. So it's really nice that you say that. It's really nice to hear.
Yeah, yeah, no, we are very happy here. We
That's
are very
great.
happy here, genuinely happy.
Okay, so Anastasia, I'd just like to thank you on behalf of all the listeners. You've been. I'm so lucky to have guests who are so eloquent, like as you are, and I hope. I'm jealous that I'm not jealous of you having to work through the weekend, but I'm jealous of the fact that you'll be in the Uzbekistan pavilion at the Architectural Biennale in Venice next week. So anyway, thank you very much, Anastasia.
Thank you so much, David. If anyone gets to listen to this before the preview week or during the preview week, I'm in the pavilion from the 7th till the 9th without leaving it. So come by to say hello.
You'll probably get hundreds.
Love it. Yes, the more the merrier. The pavilion is huge and we have lots of stories to tell.
Excellent.